our final game of the season in the Super 16 of the WNIT was pretty gut-wrenching. Parallels some games we've been seeing on TV in the NCAA tournament, but our team held the lead for 38 minutes and 45 seconds, and just the last couple of minutes of the game, we could not score, had some good looks, weren't able to put the ball in the hole. This was the first game all season we've held an opponent below 60 and didn't win. I think we were about 17-0 or 18-0 when we held our opponents to 60 or less. And so, yeah, I mean, if we're holding someone below 60, we should be able to win. I think we've got a very powerful offensive team and just, played really well for the majority of the game, but didn't close the game out well. And it was pretty gut-wrenching loss. Really felt like we had the opportunity, to finish the game out, to, kind of get some revenge on last year's final game, and just allow our team to play in the grade 8 for the first time, in school history. And so, a really cool opportunity kind of slipped out of our fingers. But that one game does not define us or take anything away from the awesome season that we had. I'm really, really proud of this group of young ladies and this coaching staff and just what we were able to accomplish as a group this year.
And another game, another contest where you had multiple players scoring in double-digit figures. It seemed to be kind of the trend and the norm coming towards the stretch of the season. How good is that to see overall that your team was really playing some of its most unselfish basketball?
We generally really hang our hats on our offense, and we want to have 4 double-digit scorers every night. If you try to take one player away, it just leaves you a little vulnerable on defense, guarding the other players. And so it's really fun to be able to have 4 and 5 scoring threats on the floor at all times. And so, we do expect to have at least 3, if not 4, double-digit scores every night, and just makes us really hard to defend.
And what's it say about this team that they're as young as they were, and you guys were as beat up as you were, making it this far into the season?
I think it shows a lot of just perseverance and resiliency during the games, but also just away from the games, the way that our players handled practices and handled scouting reports. And I know they heard a lot of messaging from well-meaning fans and family members talking about, what if you hadn't had these injuries? What if, everybody had stayed healthy? But we didn't allow our players to use that as an excuse, and they never did. We didn't sit around saying, what if? We really take a lot of pride in one of our core values, to control the controllables and just focus on things we can control. And that's what our players did in and out, just throughout the course of this season. They locked in on practice plans, they locked in on game plans, and pushed each other in practice every day. I think it shows a lot of the character of each individual player on this team, that they didn't throw in the hat or get their heads down when we were faced with being shorthanded. They just focused on when they could control. And they won't know this for about a decade, but the things that they've learned during this season, and the way they have been problem solvers and people that just focus on the controllables, like those are the things that help you in the real world. I mean, basketball is just fun. It seems like a huge deal when you're in it, and it's stressful and, all of that. But like the life lessons that our players learn through a season like this, like it's going to help them out when they don't get sleep for 2 or 3 days because they have a colicky baby, but they still have to go to work. They've got to produce. They've got to be excellent at work. They still have to do laundry and cook and take care of things at home. And they're going to know they can do all that stuff. Like they know how to handle hard well.
And you talked about a really tough loss for you guys, but you also are really, really young, which means you got a chance to get back there. How does losing in the way that you guys did, how does that seem to kind of help you guys in the future, or your players in the future, when they end up in situations like that again?
Yeah, I will probably bring up the final game of the season a lot during the summer, just as motivation. The majority of our losses this year were 1 or 2 possession losses, and you have to value the ball throughout the course of the game. You've got to communicate on defense throughout the course of the game, and oftentimes you remember the last play. I mean, our last offensive possession of the season, we executed a baseline out of bounds play and missed a layup. Like you think about those, but it was the missed block out or the careless pass, just possessions throughout the course of the game that put you in that situation where the other team can take the win at the end. And so just paying attention to detail will be a real point of emphasis this summer in summer workouts. And we are going on a foreign trip in August. We'll get a couple of games under our belt in August before school starts. And so, we want to approach those games very game-like and just, make sure that we're paying attention to detail. And the opportunity to play international games and just play before school starts, it really just kind of jump starts the entire season. And so this summer will look a little bit different than the last 3 summers just because we do have some games before school starts.
And you've been in this game a long time. We've talked about that. What kind of lessons and what examples did you learn yourself this season?
Just to hold our players to high standards. If our expectations are really high, we might not meet every expectation, but we can certainly get very close to those. The higher the expectations, the more commitment and investment we saw from our team this year. And I know sometimes our players think my expectations are unrealistic, but I want them to push themselves to be not only the best basketball players they can be, but to be the best human beings they can be. And when they finish up their tenure here at ACU and they graduate, I hope that we have instilled some good character values, some good core values that will help them be successful in whatever they do in life.
Kind of on the same page, what lessons are you hoping that this specific team took away from the course of the season?
Yeah, just the small details are the ones that are most important. There are no little insignificant things that go on. Like the little things are the main things. And we will have a pretty mature team next year with a ton of seniors. And we expect the seniors to be really good peer leaders next year and for them to step in the gap and speak up so that, I'm not the one that's correcting everything. We hope that they have learned some lessons this year, like, hey, we've got to take control of things out on the court and be more vocal, be better leaders for the underclassmen. And I fully anticipate that they will do that.
And assuming this team stays together like it is this next season, how exciting is it as a coach to have such a young team make it so far in the postseason? I mean, at some points you had 2 or 3 freshmen on the floor. How exciting is it?
Yeah, we're looking forward to next year. Honestly, I'm right in the middle of the grieving process right now. I just can't stand it when the season ends. You play your last game. It's super sad, pretty heartbreaking because unless you win a national championship, you're losing that last game. And once we got the invite to the WNIT, that was our goal. We were going to win this whole thing, and we fell short of that. And so, you're grieving with your players. I'm grieving because I know this team will be different next year. We'll add some new pieces. There'll be some pieces that are gone, and so this team won't ever play another game together. And so, I'm sort of in that grieving process. But it is super exciting to think about just the potential of next year's team because of all the battles that we've gone through together, battles we've lost, battles that we've won. I think we've learned a lot about ourselves. And so just the potential of what next year could look like is really exciting. And we are joining a new conference. It's the first year for the UAC as far as women's basketball goes. And so I'm very grateful that we get to, venture out into a new league with this team, with a very mature team.
I would like to push you a little bit on that with the Big Four. Are you super confident that they'll be getting back together next year and staying?
I am super confident that they will all be back together next year. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then down the stretch this year, like against CBU and obviously the last game, I know you don't want to talk about what ifs, but what do you think about like the role that you guys had to play like small a lot? Do you think that mattered for you guys?
For sure. When we lost Meredith, she was number 2 in the country in field goal percentage. She was on her way to having a, for sure an all-conference season, maybe a conversation about player of the year, like she was just really rolling. And so to lose that inside presence, we got small really fast. And then we lose Emma Doherty, got a little bit smaller. So, as a coaching staff, though, you can't just throw in the towel and make excuses. You got to figure out how to evolve and how to use your players the best of your ability. And that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of is just how our players handled that and how they were always willing to play a different role. And, Aaron Woodson, Natalia, Jazz Stone, like they were all put in some different situations and excelled at those, and it wasn't like, well, I'm not sure about this. They were just like, give me a chance, let's go. So playing small ball was a little bit harder, but, I thought our players just did a great job handling that for sure. Against a Cal Baptist with two really good post players, against an Illinois State with, two really good post players, we were quite a bit smaller, and that was a little bit detrimental. But, with those competitions against those two teams, it came right down to the wire with both of them. So I feel really proud of the way that our players, held their own in those situations where we were, a little bit at a deficit size-wise.
And then you mentioned Jazz. I know that down the stretch she was able to play a lot more than she was at the beginning of the season. So I guess just the confidence now that you're losing your starting point guard, like what do you see out of Jazz? What do you think for the future?
Yeah, I think that Jazz did a really good job for us down the stretch. It is really hard to come into a new program. She had been at another program for 3 seasons, learning like an entirely different system with different coaches. And it just takes a while to kind of get into the flow of things and understand what this new program is about and, what we need from her. And I thought she was hitting on all cylinders at the right time. And everybody wants to play a cajillion minutes. Everybody wants to start, all of that. But just based on what we do in practice, like I do not want to put players in situations where they're not going to be successful. And sometimes they think they're ready, but until they prove themselves in practice, I just don't want to put them out there if we don't think they are ready for that. And I feel like with Jazz, like she just kept putting in the work on her own and continuing to really progress in practice. And she was earning all that playing time down the stretch in conference play, and just really proud of the way that she responded.
I was going to ask about the new faces that you're talking about. You said there's going to be some new faces, new pieces that you're going to need. What aspect of your team do you think you can develop the most, whether it's through the freshman commits or a potential transfer?
Yeah, we can always move forward with the junkyard dog mentality. We need a little bit more of that. And not to take away from our players and how hard they play, but just fighting and competing, the last 2 minutes of the game when you have to get stops, you have to take care of the ball, just that junkyard mentality. And it's really hard to emulate that in practice, but again, with our mature team, I think they will have an understanding of, hey, this is how we lost games last year. I mean, the majority of our losses were 1 and 2 possession games, which I'll take total credit for all of those. If we are in that position, like as a head coach, I should be able to help our team, win those, whether it's in that game or it's what we're doing in practice. And so that'll be a huge point of emphasis, moving forward. Like we've got to be able to close out quarters and close out possessions. The other thing is just, we'll have some new players, and so just building chemistry over the summer. That's the main point of emphasis when we've got them here in the summer. And our summer's going to look a lot different than normal. They're coming in a little bit later because we're going to keep them here until the week before Wildcat Week, since we're going on a foreign tour. And so the summer will look a little bit different, but the main focus on that is just building chemistry, making sure everybody feels comfortable together. And the closer we can get in the summer, the more our players will hold each other accountable when the fall comes around.
And my last thing, you already alluded to it, but just that move to the UAC. And I'm curious, from what you've seen, is there any significant style of play differences from WAC to UAC basketball?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with everyone, but I did catch everybody, watch their games this year, watched a lot of, the ASUN games to kind of get a feel for that. And I think we're going to see a lot of up-tempo teams. We're going to see more pressing in the backcourt. Some teams have a little bit of size. Most teams were kind of the way our team ended up this spring, not like a lot of 6'4" dominant post players. And so, but that being said, I mean, you never know who people are going to get out of the portal, and whoever we get, it could like tweak our style of play as well. We do try to recruit players that really fit in with, how we want to play. But like if you get a difference maker and you need to let them do something a little bit different, for sure we'll be creative and flexible with that.